All right, so let's wind the clock all the way back to the early 80s. Toyota is looking around, they see what's happening with rigs like the Ford Bronco and the Chevy K5 Blazer, and they realize they need a piece of that action. But this is Toyota we're talking about, so they do something brilliant. They don't start from scratch. No, they take their legendary Hilux pickup truck, the one the entire world already knows is completely indestructible, and they decide to build on that. The formula was beautifully simple. Take the Hilux, shorten the bed, throw a couple of seats in the back, and cover the whole thing with a removable fiberglass cap. And just like that, in 1984, the 4Runner was born. It was this perfect blend of a rugged truck and a convenient passenger car. Now we have to talk about the single most iconic feature of that first gen, the removable top. This was everything. Toyota's marketing was all over it, calling it the ultimate surf wagon, pitching this lifestyle of turning your off-roader into a sun-soaked beach machine. But let's be real for a second. In practice, it was kind of a hassle. That top was heavy. You were not getting it off by yourself. You needed a few friends, and if you didn't obsessively maintain those seals, it was gonna leak. But here's the thing, who cared? The cool factor was just completely off the charts. Okay, now let's talk about what was under the hood. The story here was all about durability over speed, way over speed. The first models had the carbureted 2.4-liter 22R engine, making just 96 to 100 horsepower in a vehicle that weighed over 3,700 pounds. It was painfully slow. A really nice upgrade came in 1985 with the fuel-injected 22RE, which bumped you to a much more manageable 116 horses. For a couple of years, in 86 and 87, Toyota got a little wild and even offered a turbo version, the 22RTE. This thing is super rare today and made 135 horsepower and 173 pound-feet of torque. Finally, in 88, the 4Runner got its very first V6, the 3-liter 3VZE. This gave you 150 horses and 180 pound-feet of torque. But even with the V6, performance was, let's say, leisurely. Getting to 60 miles per hour took about 15.7 seconds. Now for the part that all the off-road nerds love to argue about, the suspension. The very first 4Runners, from 1984 to 85, came with a solid front axle. This setup is legendary among purists. Why? Because it's simple, it's brutally strong, and it gives you that incredible articulation for crawling over rocks. It's a huge reason why the 85 model is considered a holy grail by so many. But then, in 1986, Toyota made a massive change. They swapped that solid axle for an independent front suspension. This was its first real identity shift. And, looking back, this first gen is it's pure, uncut adventure. It's flawed, absolutely. It's slow, and it had that famous saggy rear end because they just used the original pickup springs. But that removable top, that solid front axle on the early models, it's an absolute classic for a reason. So if the first generation was basically a Hilux that you could take the top off of, the second gen, oh man, this is where it officially became an SUV. But it started with a huge and honestly a super controversial change. They moved to an integrated all-steel body. And you know what that meant? The beloved removable top was gone. And let me tell you, a ton of fans were seriously bummed out. But while we lost the top, we gained something way more important for its future: 4 doors. They still offered a 2-door version for a couple of years, but good luck finding one of those today. They are super rare. And yeah, it still shared its bones with the Hilux, but it was finally carving out its own identity. The interior got a massive upgrade too. It was way more car-like, way more comfortable. You can tell Toyota was watching that booming SUV market and knew they had to step up. The ride quality took a huge leap forward too. They also ditched those old-school rear leaf springs and replaced them with a much more comfortable coil spring setup. On the road, it made a night and day difference. So everything's looking great, right? New body, more doors, better interior, comfy suspension, but then we get to the engines. Here's where the story takes a sharp turn. The body and suspension were all new, but the engines, they were just carried over from the first generation. You had the 2.4-liter 22RE four-cylinder, making about 116 horses. And then you had the big one, the 3-liter 3V ZEV6 with 150 horses. And guys, performance was still terrible. The V6 took about the same 15 to 17 seconds to get to 60 miles an hour. That's not just slow for an SUV, that is painfully slow. It's no wonder this engine earned the infamous nickname, the 3 Slow. And here's why it happened. Toyota tried to civilize the 4Runner with this heavier, more refined body, but they didn't give it an engine to match. That old V6 was just completely out of its depth. The engine is the single reason why you see so many of these trucks with engine swaps today. It was a great platform just begging for a worthy engine. So, 1996 rolls around and Toyota drops the 3rd generation. And let me tell you, for so many people, this is the one. This is where Toyota absolutely perfected the formula. We're not talking about a little refresh here. This was a complete ground-up redesign. For the very first time, the 4Runner got its own unique chassis. It was now based on the much more sophisticated Land Cruiser Prado platform, and that was a massive deal. Why? Because that new platform meant a longer wheelbase, a wider track, and way more room inside. The ride quality? Night and day. It was totally transformed. We're talking coil springs at all 4 corners, new rack and pinion steering. But the real headline, the place where it truly redeemed itself, was under the hood. That old, problematic 3-liter V6? Gone. Thank goodness. The new base engine was a solid 2.7-liter 4-cylinder with 150 horsepower. Totally respectable. But the real star of the show, the engine that became an absolute legend, was the new 3.4-liter 5 VZFE V6. It made 183 horses and 217 pound-feet of torque. But the numbers don't even tell the whole story. It was incredibly smooth and ridiculously reliable. This was Toyota's direct, mic-drop answer to the failures of the old 3 Slow. The higher-end limited trim also debuted a new multi-mode 4-wheel drive system, which, for the first time, gave the 4Runner a full-time all-wheel drive setting that was safe to use on dry pavement. And, of course, this is the generation where the aftermarket just exploded. Lift kits, steel bumpers, skid plates, even superchargers. If you could dream it, you could build it. The 3rd gen became the definitive platform for customization. Let's just be real. The 3rd gen is arguably peak 4Runner. It's modern enough to be a comfortable daily driver, but it's still simple and tough enough to be an absolute beast on the trail. And that V6 is just one of the best engines Toyota ever made. Point blank, if you're looking for a used 4Runner to build, this is almost always the answer. It's just right. In 2003, Toyota just changed the entire game with the 4th generation. It was bigger, it was heavier, and let's be honest, the styling was, well, it was a little round. It wasn't exactly love at first sight for everybody. But, and this is a huge but, there was a very good reason for this. The 4Runner now shared its platform with the Lexus GX. Yeah, a Lexus. All of a sudden, it had this incredibly comfortable, super composed ride on the highway. It also got more family-friendly, offering an optional 3rd-row seat for the very first time. But none of that is the real headline. The real story, the big news, is this. For the first and so far only, you could get it with a V8 engine. And we're not talking about just any V8. They dropped in the legendary 4.7-liter 2UZ-FE, the same beast you'd find in the Tundra or the Land Cruiser. At first, it was putting out 235 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. Then, in 2005, it got a nice little power bump to around 270 horses. Now the standard V6 was no joke either. It was a new, powerful 4-liter engine making 245 horsepower and 282 pound-feet of torque. Finally, the 4Runner had serious muscle, no matter which engine you picked. The V6 models could hit 60 in about 7.1 seconds, and that V8 just felt even faster with all that low-end torque. And towing? With the V8, capacity shot up to over 7,000 pounds. This is also the generation where Toyota started leaning into electronic aids. It introduced features like downhill assist control and hill start assist. The four-wheel drive systems got smarter too. V8 models came standard with this really sophisticated full-time four-wheel drive system that had a Torsen locking center differential. And if you got the Sport Edition, it used hydraulics to link opposite corners of the truck, like front right to back left, and it drastically cut down on body roll when you were cornering on the pavement. You can see what Toyota was doing. They were making an aggressive push to stack the 4Runner up against premium SUVs, but with that bulletproof Toyota reliability. Of course, all this added complexity was a turnoff for some of the purists who just loved the 4Runner for being a simple, rugged truck. But here's my take. If you can find a clean, rust-free 2005 or later V8 model, you've got one of the best all-around SUVs ever made. It's powerful, it's comfortable, and it's still incredibly capable. It's the iron fist in a velvet glove. All right, so let's talk about the absolute legend, the 5th generation. After the 4th gen got a little soft, Toyota came roaring back in 2010. This one was a beast right out of the gate. The styling was boxy, aggressive, and just unapologetically tough. It looked like a 4Runner again, and everybody, myself included, absolutely loved it. This thing would go on to have an insane 14-year run. Now, you gotta understand, this 14-year run is what defines this generation. In an industry that redesigns everything every 5 or 6 years, it stood its ground. And this wasn't Toyota being lazy. It was a genius move. They realized that people valued proven, unkillable reliability way more than the latest giant iPad on the dash. Under the hood, Toyota kept it simple. Their motto was, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." The V8 was gone, and after a quick appearance in 2010, the little 4-cylinder vanished too. For its entire 14-year run, the 5th gen had one legendary powertrain, that updated 4-liter V6, making 270 horsepower and 278 pound-feet of torque. And it was mated to an ancient but absolutely indestructible 5-speed automatic transmission. Now let's be real, was it fast? No. 0 to 60 was around 7.7 seconds. Was it good on gas? Absolutely not. It was a joke. You'd be lucky to see 17 miles per gallon combined. But was it reliable? You bet. Owners see these engines blow past 250,000 miles with just basic maintenance. That old technology was its secret weapon. This is also the generation where trim levels became everything. The Trail Edition, which later got renamed the TRD Off-Road, brought serious off-road hardware to the masses. This is where we got high-tech electronic aids like the crawl control and multi-terrain select, letting you dial in the traction for mud, sand, or whatever. Look, the 5th gen is the 4Runner that perfected the formula and then just refused to change it. And you know what? We loved it for that. The gas mileage is a joke, and that 5-speed transmission feels like it's from another century, because it is. But that powertrain is unkillable. The styling is timeless, and it's the absolute definition of a modern classic.